close friend of mine, Dianne Hamilton. She is not only a person who is one of my spiritual partners on Ultimate Impact with Dr. Jim Richards Ministry, but also we really became close friends. I opened up my heart to her. She did the same thing with me, and we had amazing discussion. And Dianne, I love you. I really love you.
Thank you, Abby. I love you too.
She is
With all my heart, I do. You're so special to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Ditto, 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 100 times. And
Yeah.
she is one of very active members of Ultimate Impact. She's going to become very soon a heart physics coaches. And so this is very responsible position. I'm going to let her talk about it just to give you a heads up. What is this? What is this coaching heart physics? What is, Dianne, make note. I want you to tell people. Yes, and it's all about healing your broken heart, of my broken heart. And we all had these situations happening in our lives where we've been broken, but Jesus. Again, but Jesus. He is the ultimate healer. He is the ultimate goal. He is everything to us. And today, Dianne, I want to give her a chance to tell us her incredible story, journey with Jesus.
Yes.
Who she is today only testifies of God's mercy, grace, goodness,
absolutely,
and absolute love, unending, unconditional love. So Dianne, where would you like to start? Why don't we start from your birth?
Yeah, so just so appreciate Abby giving me this opportunity to just share my story. And I do have quite a story, like many of us do. And as she has said it so well, only for the Lord and his goodness and faithfulness to me. It's just been amazing to me. And I'll talk more about that as we go. Yes. I was born in a very small town in Nova Scotia in Canada. We're on the east coast of Canada, really the furthest eastern province on the Atlantic Ocean. I was born in the Annapolis Valley. It's a very, very beautiful place. And so I had a small town upbringing. My mom is actually still living. She will soon be 92. And my dad passed away 17 years ago, but he was a small businessman. He was my hero. He was an absolutely wonderful, wonderful man. I have only one sister. She was 6 years older than I. And so we really were not terribly close. But our relationship is evolving. And I love my sister. And I have only one daughter, and she is now 34, and she has been just the greatest blessing of my life.
Could you tell us what's her name? What's her name?
Her name is Amaria, and it's spelled Amarea, and it means promise of God fulfilled by a daughter.
Amen. Awesome.
And so she had to learn to spell that name because people could never catch her name. They always thought it was Anne-Marie, but it's Amaria. And she's just a beautiful gal who, in spite of all my ups and downs, has just remained my closest friend. And she's happily married 12 years. And she has a wonderful husband, Peter, and I have two beautiful grandchildren who are my heart. Abigail is 4, and my grandson, Hunter, is 6, and they are definitely a big part of my life. So I give thanks to God for my wonderful family.
And they all live close with you in the same.
Yeah, within an hour and a half. Yes. Yeah. Oh. So very accessible. So we're very blessed. Very blessed that way. So yeah.
Well, tell us, how did you grow up? About your growing up.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Several years ago, I discovered this black and white picture that my mother had of me when I was a little girl, and I was probably maybe three or four. And I was so struck by the expression on my face. And that picture I put by my nightstand, I had it there for years and years because it just impacted me so much. And the expression on my face was just completely lost, lost, confused. And it seemed even today, as sometimes I see another picture of myself that someone will have had or comes up in a photo album or whatever, there seemed to be two expressions on my face. One was it never smiling, never ever smiling, just lost. Or as I started into my teenage years, acting out. So just this, now they do it on purpose, the crazy faces, right?
Yes.
And just, which so speaks to, as I look back and see, kind of try to sort out, your childhood.
Yes.
To tell you the truth, God has created me to be someone who has, I really am impacted by my environment. I have a deep sensitivity to my environment, to what's going on around me, to people, to interactions. And of course, I didn't understand that for a good deal of my life. And so as a child, I perceived my environment as one where I just could never be enough. I could never get it right. It felt to me like I was constantly criticized. I was desperate for validation. I was desperate for encouragement, for love, and for acceptance. And of course, some of this has to do with the generation. My parents' generation, they had just come out of the Second World War. And so there were dynamics, I think, from that where they just didn't talk about emotional things or express love. And it really had a devastating effect on me because I just never, I felt I was not valued. I never felt valued. I never felt that I had worth. If anything, I just felt like I was a nuisance. I was a bother. That's just the way I grew up. And when I started school, my sister, who was 6 years older than I, got tasked with walking me to school and staying with me in the primary school line, which she hated. And she would leave and I would turn around and walk home. I was just scared to death to be with the other children, to be in that environment. And that actually went on for some time before they finally got me to they made arrangements for me to be able to go in the classroom and not have to stay outside. And that's how they eventually got me to stay in school. So again, this was just already, 5 years old. Some of these things were starting to play out. In grade 5, I went through another very difficult time. I could not go in the classroom. I just can remember cowering really out in where the coat racks were and crying that I just didn't have the confidence to go in the classroom and be with the other children. And so again, these things were starting to really play out in my life. And by age 15, I was starting to turn to wherever I could find acceptance. I fortunately somehow managed to do quite well in school. So although academically I could do well, but socially and emotionally, that was a different story. It was very difficult for me. And I changed schools actually for my last 2 years of high school and went to a rural school where I had friends, and those were my best, school memories. I really did flourish and do well there.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, I was continuing to look in the wrong places for validation and for acceptance. We had grown up, we were taken to church, but there was no teaching about God, or God was not talked about in our home. It was a very traditional, performance oriented church.
Yes.
So I had no really foundation from my home life for Christianity. So my dad actually was a very astute businessman. He was very well liked in the community. He was well known, and he was a very kind man. And he got involved in a lot of community activities, and so he was gone every night of the week. He was out at meetings or doing things, and my dad really was my nurturer, and his presence was really, really missed in our home. And so although he was a wonderful father, and he did, he really did do the very best he could do, there were some other dynamics that were very, very, very difficult. So
can I ask you, sometimes you notice it's like this, we think, oh, our kids are fine, they're just growing, they playing outside, and we start doing other activities, we help the whole world while our house is on fire.
yes,
I don't want to blame your dad, but I assume
think
he had
that's
a
an
great
excellent point.
Mhm.
Because my dad was very kind and compassionate. He truly wanted to
Yeah, good
uh,
motives.
he wanted to serve his community. The community had been good to his business, and he wanted to serve, and he did very well, as a matter
But
of
his
fact. But
daughters were missing him so
yes,
much.
yes, and I think he realized that later on in his life. He came to understand that. Um, I actually got married the first time. I am multi-married and divorced. I got married the first time at age 19. It was a marriage that should never have happened. I was lost, and I had zero self-worth. So the first person who came along, I had no clue what to do with my life, or even how to manage life, how to go about life. And so I got married, and that marriage lasted 3 months. So at the age of 19, going into age 20, this was like another black mark against me, because,
Confirmation
40
that
years ago,
I mean nothing. I'm bothering people.
yeah, and 40 years ago, divorce was really still very taboo. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
yeah, so there were layers, just layer upon layer, that continued to confirm to me that I had no value. I was terribly, just not, there was something terribly wrong with me. That, again, this was just getting reinforced more and more and more. I did manage somehow to, I went to university for a year. I didn't complete the year. And this would be the story of my life. I would start things, but just then would not complete them. But in spite of that, God kept putting opportunities in front of me.
Yes.
I would get like amazing opportunities that I look back now, I'm overcome, because it was God's goodness to me. He kept trying to lead me in the right path and putting opportunities in front of me. So I had amazing opportunities in spite of not finishing university. I had great jobs, and usually these jobs were jobs where I could study and learn. And so that's what I did.
What major did you go for?
Well, I ended up really, the main focus of my studies ended up being in accounting. And I never did get a professional designation, but I really was self-taught. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but but in some of these things, again, you know, I would sabotage them. Many good things would come along, but because I felt so unworthy, so undeserving, I would just sabotage them. And so I actually remarried at age 25. And my daughter was born about not quite 5 years later. And
from that husband.
Yes. And it was only a few months after I was married that all these feelings began to surface again, and I began to seek God. And God put things in my path.
Isn't it? Let me just say, if our heart isn't healed, even if we get into a good relationship, we will sabotage. We will break this. We have to heal our heart.
Absolutely. So I did not have, I didn't even know anything about the born again experience or salvation. I had
Hold on, you were going to church, but you didn't know about newborn experience.
It was never preached. Never preached. The salvation message was never preached in my church, in our area. Really, those types of churches just did not exist. So a Billy Graham book came across my path. I thought he wrote it to me personally. At the same time, some people got introduced into our lives who invited us to church. And my husband at that time and myself both made a commitment to Christ. And I was radically saved. Radically saved.
How old were you then?
I was 25.
25?
Yes. And it was the happiest years I had ever experienced. I had a husband I loved. I had my daughter. We were in a church that I had no idea churches like this even existed. They were just the happiest years. I was just, my dream had come true. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to me, although obviously I knew things weren't right, my husband got into drugs, and he had struggled with drugs as a teenager. He had lost his mother very early in his life, and he had struggled with drugs as a teenager, but they had not been a part of his life for some time when I married him. And he got in with some of his former friends, and he started doing really, really hard drugs, mainlining drugs. And so, and I was I had no idea about any of this. So I just knew that there was something terribly wrong. So by the time my daughter was born, he was not in a good place at all. And so we remained together for 2.5 years after she was born. But it got to the point where I just was not able to stay in that environment. It was
right.
You know, he was going through withdrawals. I realize now, I guess a lot of times he would go away and come home, and I was left with no vehicle with a baby, and we had moved to another city, and I didn't know anybody, and it was just not a good situation. But I discovered after I left that that he was in serious trouble with drugs. My daughter saw him once after we left, and she never saw him again. And his life continued to spiral downhill in spite of just the best Christian people trying to help him. We tried everything to get him help, but they're just, they have to want help. And so what really happened at that time was my dream was crushed. My dream of a family. I never, ever wanted to be divorced again or separated. I wanted to have a family unit. That was my dream. And I can tell you that I was just absolutely crushed.
By then you were about 33, 30?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I was living in another province. I moved back to my hometown to have my family support me, but I was, again, lost. I was now a single parent.
Yeah,
And
still young.
still young. My
Mm-hmm.
daughter was not quite 3,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just lost. And my greatest fear was that I could not support her.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all because I had no self-confidence. I had such low self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, the primary thing on my mind was I need to be in a relationship. And so it was always about, I need to
Look,
get,
we women are looking for security, number one.
yes,
Not even to be loved. We can survive and, be in a relationship where man doesn't love us. He can abuse as long as we feel safe,
yes,
protected,
yes.
provided. Mm-hmm.
So this created just a pattern of um, not having any value for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I basically would accept anyone who would come along and seemed interested because I never felt that I deserved anything other than that. A parallel to all my relationship issues was I started a business at age 29. I had decided that more than anything in the world, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but I knew I had to work. So at age 29, and this was several years ago now, I decided I was going to work from home. And that was almost unheard of
Yeah.
then. But I was so committed that
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be able to be home to bring up my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Although I had absolutely no experience,
Mm-hmm.
I started my own business where I did accounting work for small and medium-sized businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a lot even of the education I needed to do it, but I was just determined I was going to do it. So I started my business, and I would have clients say, well, could you do this for me? Could you do that for me? And I would nod my head yes, my eyes wide and my heart pounding, because I knew I didn't have a clue how to do what they were saying, but I just knew I would find out. I would teach myself. So that's what I did. I taught myself as I went. And so I was able to move that business back to Nova Scotia when I moved home. And that business continued to evolve, and it continues. There's another piece of the story that I will get to, but I was actually able to work from home until really my whole career, but I was at home until my daughter got married and left home.
Wow. I want to say one thing, honey. Let me just say, this is amazing lesson point. I want everybody mark this down if you are writing notes. Determination, perseverance, and consistency can do impossible things. And Dianne is just a live confirmation.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And God's provision. My greatest fear was that I could not provide.
Yes.
And his provision was just absolutely amazing. But my daughter was still home with me working at home until she left to get married. And I just have always been so incredibly grateful to God that he honored that desire of my heart and provided the way for me to do that.
Yes.
This actually was the point where it started. I had, 20 plus years of just relationship failures. One of the things that happened to me, and again, these were my immaturity as a Christian. Although from the time I was saved, really, I was very committed. I almost immediately knew that I was someone who I just felt drawn to prayer. I would pray for hours. And I developed early because I was mentored well as a young Christian. I developed really good Bible reading habits and studying, not in depth, but more reading probably than studying. But I was committed. There was a couple of years that I kind of fell off the path, but they were short-lived. But during this period of these relationship issues and some very, very horrendous marriages and abuse, I had people, this happened to me twice. I did not look to date or anything. I just wanted really to be alone and to bring up my daughter. But I had a pastor and his wife who came into my life tell me, God told me you are to meet this person, and we believe God wants the two of you to be together. Well, I was just out of a very abusive marriage, in absolutely no place to be in a relationship with anybody. But I was a fairly new Christian, and in spite, I just didn't have the teaching or the maturity to, and these were pastors. So I thought,
yes, what can you do? Those are your authorities.
yeah. And I thought, and when you make a number of mistakes coupled with low self-worth, you don't trust your own judgment. So I guess gladly thought, well, they know better than I do. So that tripped me up. And but I made those choices. No one else made those choices. I did, and I did have a choice. So
but hold on, they said they believe God have told them. This is so interesting. And
yes.
I want listeners to be aware and pause for a second. If somebody tells you God told them about you, ding, 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 big red light.
Absolutely. If God hasn't told you, right?
Don't
God doesn't
do
tell
that.
other people things that he's not going to tell you. I know that now. Unfortunately, I didn't know that then.
Okay.
My self-image, my measurement of my self-worth just kept spiraling. Every failure it just kept going down, down, down. And actually, I had this picture in my mind of, I could picture this hole in the ground, and there were hands coming up out of the hole, and my feet were dangling over the hole, and these hands were trying to get my ankles and pull me down in this hole. And I had that picture in my mind for several years. It just seemed to picture my life of trying to stay above ground. And I'm not given to a lot of spiritual dreams or prophetic dreams, but I had a dream that I've never forgotten. And in this dream, it was a violent, violent storm, and I was outside, and it was the wind was blowing, and it was blowing me, and I would grab hold of a tree, and I would hang on to the tree with all my might and just keep saying, Jesus, Jesus. And if I said the word Jesus, then I would be okay. There were big tractor trailers crashing down off the sides of mountains, and it was just a violent storm, and I would just get picked up, and I'd be grabbing hold of another telephone pole or another tree. And that was my life. That seemed to be, just such a depiction of the way my life was going. I had 11 years where I went through, I never dated. I never felt that I just got out of these situations, and I learned to be so content on my own. I was just so happy on my own. I didn't need anything. I was just really happy to be on my own. I had 11 years of that. I spent 11 years really seeking God, praying. I spent hours and hours and hours, although I was in a very, very busy career by this point, but any spare time I had. My daughter got married during this period, and she left home, and which was very difficult. But anyway, I had, by this time, I had an amazing career that was happening. but I had another situation happen, and it was during a time in my career. We were opening another business, and I was exhausted. And one of my closest friends, a woman who I deeply respected and still respect very much, she was a woman of great prayer. And she walked into my office one day and she sat down and she said, "You know, Dianne, I really believe God has told me you should get married again." I was
Let me go. Let me go.
I
Okay.
was aghast.
Here is your heart torn apart. You're not being healed.
Yes.
You're not at peace. You're lost, and people put you in another jeopardy, right? Relationship.
I was aghast. And to be quite honest with you, initially, I was kind of angry. I thought, oh, could anyone who knows what my life has been like possibly say that to me?
Yes. And then you start thinking those people that matchmake those single people, they don't know their hearts, what's happening in them. They really don't know. Even if you think you do, then you break their lives even more, but with good intentions. So we gotta be careful.
Oh, absolutely. And this wonderful, wonderful lady was doing what she really thought was
good motive.
For my best benefit, right? And so after 11 years of being on my own and being not in a good place to make these kind of decisions, because it was just incredibly busy in my work life and I was exhausted, but I opened the door to it again because I started to think about what I was lacking in my life, which was a support, someone who could help me, companionship, someone to just share life with. And I started to really think about the lack. So over a period of time, I opened the door again and began a relationship with someone and who was actually a former pastor. And everything, although there were still some flags, I proceeded and got married again. And after really about a year and a half, I realized I had a pattern of being drawn to narcissistic men. And they are typically drawn to people who have very high levels of empathy, who they can easily control. And I was one of those people because of my low self-worth and just
vulnerability. Yes. And you don't notice it when you live in narcissistic environment. You don't notice
it was my normal, you know.
That's your norm. That's your
norm. Was. And so after a year and a half, I realized with horror, I mean, I couldn't even really let it up in my conscious level that it had happened again. And I don't even know how to describe what I went through. It was a darkness and a depth of pain that the only way I know to describe it is it felt like death. And I wasn't suicidal somehow, but I have never experienced darkness like that, or I had felt a failure for most of my life. This was beyond. And my greatest angst was that I had failed God again. I had failed God. And I loved him. I love God with all my heart. I truly did.
These moments are the darkest moment Dianne is talking about.
They are. And
tell us, what did you do? What did you do in these worst, painful moments?
I guess maybe it was a blessing that I was still in this crazy season of my career, and somehow or other, God's grace, His strength. I never missed a day from work. I never missed time from work, no matter what I was going through.
Because that helps us keep going.
God sustained me somehow. He did. And by his grace, I got through it, but I was tormented with
ripped
just
apart
decades now of guilt and shame. Here I was, a Christian, and I had these relationship failures and divorces and just so filled with shame. And I was in the absolute depths of despair. I honestly, I didn't know what to do, but the one thing I knew was there was no other place to go but God. I knew that. I knew that he was my only answer. And it's only him that gave me the strength to hang on by a thread, to hang on by a thread. So I was at my bedside one night, just crying out to God. God help me. I've just made such a mess of my life, and I don't know what to do. And it was 10 o'clock at night, and I was by my bed, and my cell phone rang, and I picked it up, and it said on the screen, Phoenix, Arizona. And I thought it was, want to call from a call center or something. I didn't know anybody in Phoenix, Arizona.
The scam.
And, yeah, that's what I thought. So, but I felt the Holy Spirit say to me, you need to answer that call, because I don't usually answer those types of calls. So I did. I picked up the phone and I said, hello. This big, beautiful voice on the other end said, hello, sister. This is Audrey Meisner. I was like, what? What?
I mean, from heaven.
I had followed her parents' ministry from Winnipeg, Manitoba for decades. I loved them. I absolutely loved them.
Who
I
doesn't
didn't know them.
We love you, Audrey and Bob.
Yes. And Willard and Betty, they were like my Bible school. I watched their program every day while I worked. I had it on in the background.
And she calls you at this moment.
I did not know her. I had no connection with her. But she called me and she said, I just knew I was supposed to call you.
Did you write to her an email ever about anything?
I had commented on something. I had partnered with their ministry, so she had my contact information just as a, ministry partner.
So it took her obedience to the Holy Spirit to grab a phone and call that person from comments.
Out of nowhere. I mean, and I'm going to tell you something. That phone call was my lifeline. It was my lifeline. So I explained to her a little bit of what was happening in my life. She just loved me. She just said, Dianne, I just want to be your friend. I'm going to be here for you. Here's my cell number. You can call me anytime you want to. We can talk. I didn't have a friend like that to be found anywhere.
Yes. With grace.
We didn't have those types of churches, and I just didn't have that kind of sister friend.
Yeah.
And it was just a lifeline from heaven to me. So she continued, we stayed in touch, and she started to do some heart physics with me over the phone. I had no clue what it was. I had no idea what she was doing. I loved Audrey and I trusted her. Yes. Other than that, I had been just giving by. I didn't know.
Make me with nobody, Audrey.
Yeah. Yes. So she had said to me, Dianne, why don't you come to Arizona?
Wow.
And we'll do an intensive. And I said, wow, Audrey, I want to do that. I really want to do that. But I was in the midst of this crazy season at at work, and my mom was living in an in-law suite in our home, and I just couldn't leave her. So it was actually a year later that I actually, my mom had moved into assisted living, and I had put the property up for sale, and so I was able to make arrangements to go out to Phoenix for a week. And Audrey spent every day with me. We did some sessions together. We did heart physics. I had homework to do every night. But there was one particular session she did with me. And I saw this cloak of shame over my heart. It was black. It was like black, like oil. It was like a pelt of an animal, and I could actually see the claws from the paws. And God showed me it was so tightly wrapped around my heart that nothing else could get in. It just had completely encased my heart. And in that session, that cloak of shame, that pelt that was covering my heart, left. And from that day forward,
that's amazing.
I have never, ever felt shame again. And I came home from Arizona. Audrey didn't tell me it was heart physics that she, was doing with me. But I got in touch with her and I said, Audrey, whatever it is you did with me, I need to learn how to do this, because there's people here in my area that need this, and I need to learn about this. And so she began to explain to me about heart physics. So I did not know anything about Impact Ministries, although I had seen Dr. Jim on New Day, and I had actually bought one of the books that they recommended, Moving Your Invisible Boundaries. The book is falling apart. I think I read it 5 times. I had such a hard time. I had a love-hate relationship.
I just started translating this in Polish. I'm sorry, just want to add. Awesome.
I had just such a difficult time with the information. It took me 5 years.
Could you tell those that are new, what is this heart physics? Just
yes.
This is a program.
Yes. So I didn't know anything about Impact Ministries, or had no clue about any of it. But Audrey said, "Well, you should enroll in the heart physics coach certification program." I was like, "Yes, yes." I'd never even done heart physics before, so I enrolled in the program.
Yes,
and I was still working in my career at the time, so I stayed at it, but it wasn't happening quickly because I had limited time to spend on it. And so in heart physics, what happens is it teaches you how to connect to God in your heart. It is an incredible, incredible tool where you move into your heart zone, you meet with the Lord, and you identify, God takes you and you identify areas that have been wounds and just places in your heart that block you from moving forward in your life. And so I embraced that. I was doing heart physics, but I was using the guided meditations that were part of the program. And the tool really is to teach you to eventually be able to do these meditations without any help. You do them on your own. I just couldn't seem to get there. I was terrified because I had no confidence. Right. That I wouldn't do it right, or something wouldn't go right. So it took me a long time. By this time, I was in touch with Pat Richards, who is the heart physics supervisor for those of us who are on the certification program.
We love
And
Pat.
She was encouraging me to join Ultimate Impact Mentorship Group. And so eventually, I think it was a year ago, April, I joined Ultimate Impact. When I started that and realized the incredible teaching and the how-tos, the practical application of for years, the church had taught me where I was supposed to be, but they never taught me how to get there, or weren't able to give me those practical applications of how do I make this work? How do I get there? I just spent decades frustrated, trying to fix myself, trying to identify what was wrong with me, that I kept failing and getting myself into these situations. I actually did the first 2 or 3 workshops of Ultimate Impact Mentorship as an intensive. I listened to them day and night. I would do like 3 sessions a day. And because it was starting to awaken something inside me, and starting for the first time, my Christian life was starting to make sense. It was starting to be logical. It was starting to be something I could understand and grasp and have the how-to, the encouragement to. It's not just about the knowledge, it's about practically applying it in your life. So I mean, I'm sure people in Ultimate Impact wonder, is this girl, like, what is wrong with her? She's just so here all the time, engaged. I was desperate. So what you saw was my desperation. I was desperate to understand how I could make the promises of God manifest in my life, how I could get out from under this terrible, terrible weight of unworthiness and just the guilt and all those horrible.
You mentioned imposter syndrome. Would you explain a little bit about that and tell people, because you got free from this?
Yeah, I just want to read you there's a quick explanation of it. The imposter syndrome is a phenomenon, really. It's a psychological pattern where you doubt your accomplishments and you have a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. So even when all the good things were happening in my career, I was getting incredible promotion, I was experiencing and I was doing a lot of professional development. I was very blessed to go to California twice under Henry Cloud and John Townsend and do their Ultimate Leadership Intensive, which was extremely helpful. I was just so blessed. I won awards. Our business was winning awards. But inside, I just kept thinking, they don't know me. They don't know who I really am.
How many people live in this age?
Yeah, if they knew who I really was, they would know, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. And so I lived with that for a long time. So the joining Ultimate Impact Mentorship Group and being completely engaged, doing the homework, doing the practical application began to transform my heart. And all the years of trying to fix myself, which I did so many development plans and read so many books, another sermon, another preacher, another this, another that, finally came to an end. And it was Dr. Jim would encourage us, stop asking why, stop looking inward and trying to find out what's wrong. And I inside was going, no, I'm sorry. I agree with everything else you've taught me, but I can't agree with this. I have to know what's wrong with me. But eventually I said, okay, I trust these people. I'm going to do what they're saying. I'm going to let this go. And I stopped asking the question. I started looking to the solution, which is God, and learning about who he really is. Because you see, I didn't know who he really was. And amazingly, 3 or 4 months later, I look back, but not because I was seeking answers. The answers had come. And
Mhm.
but it was because
Mhm.
I had 100% turned my focus to learning who Jesus is, what he did for us on the cross. You see, I had never had that understanding, never. And
So when you discover who really Jesus is,
right,
that's the key to transformation.
I had a
Not you.
moment.
Uh-huh.
I
Go
had
on.
a moment that was transformational to
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
In one of our sessions,
Mhm.
Dr. Jim talked about how sometimes
Mhm.
we can
Mhm.
see God
Mhm.
the way we were treated possibly by our parents through our life experience.
I remember
And
that
so
session.
we project that onto God.
Yeah.
And in a heartbeat, I realized I had projected
Yeah.
onto God my experience in my home life. That someone who I never knew if I, when I, it would turn on me, when I would be criticized, when I would be found wanting. I held this view of God that God was someone to be satisfied, someone I needed to be perfect for. And because I was far from perfect, I just knew I could never meet those requirements.
Mhm.
And so as I had to learn who God was, and I also needed to let go of who he wasn't. That was huge for me.
That's big. Who he wasn't. How many lies do we believe about God and ours?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And as we were so well mentored, we were taught to go into the scriptures,
Yeah.
to study God's names,
Mhm.
and all this material is available through the Impact Ministries website. I started to meditate and ponder and study the names of God. And there's also a poster called the I Am Scriptures, the scriptures of who I am. I needed to learn who he was. I needed to learn who he said I was.
Mhm.
And I needed to understand, and I needed to send all that old identity away and put on my new man, the new identity. Now, I had heard all those terms in my many years in the church, but I never knew how to do it.
Mhm.
It was just something that seemed unattainable for me.
We were never taught how to apply this
No.
truth.
And there was a moment in time
Mhm.
when I remember sitting in my church one day, and this was probably 6 or 7 years ago,
Yes.
and I looked around and I went, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I have been here in that particular church for over 20 years.
Yes.
I don't see anyone really living and experiencing God's victory, his
Cliche.
promises,
Mhm. Hypocrisy.
living in a state of peace, contentment. I just looked around and I said, there's something wrong. This
Mhm.
isn't working for me.
They just
And
don't
I
know
don't
how.
really know anyone else who it's working for. But this was the missing piece. It was the how to. Learning about our Father, learning who he is, learning and applying it, writing it into our heart beliefs. I had a ton of heart beliefs that through heart physics, I was able to send away out of my heart, and through heart physics, able to write new beliefs into my heart. The truth of who my Father is, the truth of who I am to him, the truth of the cross, his death, his burial, his resurrection, the truth of the propitiation and what that means for me. I was taught how to put myself in his names, how to experience myself and experiencing his Jehovah Shalom peace, experiencing him as Jehovah Tsidkenu, my righteousness, experiencing that, feeling the emotion of it, And my heart began to be transformed. My life began to be transformed from the inside out.
Mm.
And I am 64 years old. I will be in another month.
You look so young. You look pretty and young.
Thank
Seriously.
you.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
It's age 64.
Mm-hmm.
I now have the freedom to be who God created me to be.
Mm.
Abby, you have been a part of that.
Mm.
Our dear friends from Ultimate, the ones, that we have connected. I
Yes.
have the freedom to be who I am. And it's been so wonderful to me to have all of you in my life that I can let me out.
Yes.
God gave me a picture when I first started heart physics.
Yes.
I was in one of my heart sessions, and I saw
Mm-hmm.
in the deepest place of my inner person a little child in pitch black, all curled up in a fetal position. And God showed me that little girl had gone there years and years and years ago and hidden and had never come out. And now, over many, many, many heart sessions and many, many, many um, days of doing heart work. Last summer was the summer of weeping. I spent every day on our deck here at our cottage weeping, doing heart work every day, just weeping. Years of grief, of pain, of hurt being released. And that little child curled up in a ball in the pitch black has been released. And I am able to be me, and I am accepted. I'm loved. I'm approved of. I am experiencing life. And now my heart, Abby, is I want to share this with every person
Mm-hmm.
who has never experienced this. I want them to experience the freedom. I want them to experience our Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, I know so many people who have lived in this defeat, in this bondage, most of their lives, and who need to know these things. They need to learn who God
Discover,
really is.
discover another room. You don't have to sit in darkness. Mm-hmm.
That's right. There is freedom. There is light. He is our light, our life, our love. All there is a 9 virtues meditation. I use that extensively.
Mm.
um, and just and continue to
Yeah.
write on my heart the truth, not the lies that I believed about myself for years and years and years. When I was doing my heart certification study portion, and I'm now midway through my case studies, there's a module called New Beginnings, and there are 2 heart meditations in there, which I'm going to tell you something. They were transformational to me. There is a meditation in there on the crucifixion, and there's one on the resurrection. I have done them several times, and I will continue to do them, I know, the rest of my life. They changed my life. They were so deeply impactful to experience the crucifixion in my heart and experience the resurrection. I just would highly, 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 if people have never done them, they were just transformational for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that is a
Mm-hmm.
summary really of my journey,
I
of
have a
my life.
question to you. You were talking about 3 people in your
Yes.
life. Could you talk about them?
Yeah.
3 significant people.
You know, in my growing up years, I did not receive encouragement. I did not receive, no one really encouraged me or spoke into my life. But we had a family doctor. She was a beautiful, beautiful lady. Her name was Dr. Ram. And I was maybe, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years old. But every time I went to see her, she would say to me, "You need to be an accountant. You need to be an accountant or a lawyer. And
She put
I
the
mean,
seed inside you. She put the seed.
No one in all my growing up years had ever spoken anything to me about
She did.
anything like that. And unfortunately, she has passed away. I tried to find her recently because I wanted to go back to her and tell her that I never forgot those words and what they meant to me over my life,
Yes.
because I had never had anyone speak into my life like that.
So good.
The second person was when I decided to start my own business when my daughter was born. There was a gentleman who I had been referred to who lived in this new area I was living in, and he was an accountant, a professional accountant. So I went to him and I set up an appointment with him and I told him what I wanted to do, and he became a mentor to me.
Oh.
And he stood by my side for years and years and years. He sent me the referrals for my first clients. And when I eventually returned back to Nova Scotia, it was a couple of years later when he called me one day and he said, "Are you still taking clients?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, I have someone who is interested in having you do some work for them. And he said, "You're going to know who it is." And I said, "Oh, okay." So he told me the name. The man's name was Pete Luckett, and Pete Luckett was very well known across Canada, really. He was a TV personality. He was an Englishman from Nottingham, England. He was affectionately dubbed Canada's greengrocer, and he had businesses in New Brunswick, but he was moving his business to Nova Scotia, and he was looking for someone to be his accountant, to do all his accounting work. So I was shocked, couldn't believe it, because I knew who he was. I had shopped at his market in New Brunswick, and I knew him from TV because he was on TV on a regular basis. He had his own little segment. And so he came and opened his business. I started working with him, opened the business with him, and stayed with him for 25 years for the first 17 years as controller. And then he was an entrepreneur. It was like the most amazing opportunity anybody could have ever been given. And God afforded me that opportunity to work with this man.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
Side by side with him. He eventually handed his whole business he had built over those 17 years over to me. As he went off he opened a vineyard and then a winery, and he just had other things to do. He handed a $30 million a year business over to me. We had 300 to 400 employees, and it was just, and you look at my life on the relationship side and all the issues I had, God, and look at the fears I had of not being able to provide. And look what God did. And this man, Pete, he was driven, passionate. And that he supported me through thick and thin. Whatever decision I made, he backed me. He never questioned me. He supported me. He backed me. He believed in me.
What means to recreate trust and be a reliable person? You are very disciplined, Dianne. I can see it in your life. This goes so far.
And
it takes us so far.
But the key thing that out of all the incredible things that I enjoyed and the opportunities I was given, the greatest thing was he believed in me.
Yeah.
I could never have done what I did if he had not believed in me. And he did.
So what Dr. Jim says, can I add that? He says,
yes,
the person who has the greatest influence on us is not who we believe in, but who believes in us.
Yes. So I just, and that's the reason I bring it up, is because it is so important to believe in people.
Yes.
I remember having staff people come on staff. Some of these people were just were just in terrible emotional and mental angst. And honestly, there were people that I just invested in them. I believed in them.
Yes.
I stood behind them.
Yes.
But I did learn a valuable lesson, was that you don't hire people based on potential. I did learn that the hard way a few times, but I saw potential in them. I wanted to believe in them, and I gave them a lot of opportunities. And
You
those were
let them grow. You believe in them. You put them here.
Yes.
You tell them who they are, but they have to grow sometimes. They're not there.
They do.
Mhm.
But those were the greatest blessings. The blessings I had over my career to pray for people.
Yes.
To just pray for them when they didn't even want me to pray for them, but I would still pray for them. You know, not with them, but for them. Pray for them, just all the time, praying for our staff. And those were to be able to be Christ's representative in the workplace. Those were the greatest, greatest blessings, really, of my career. And so that was an amazing time. I finished work about 1.5 years ago. I unfortunately had some back and hip issues, and I just couldn't continue. And so, but has been a tremendous blessing too, because I study. I spend time with God, which has been a passion of mine for years. I never had the opportunity until now to do it. So I'm just so blessed. I just, there's a couple of things that I would really like to, and I know our time is probably getting close to being done, but as I look back over my life, there's some things that stand out to me.
Yes.
You see, even in the worst of my trials, even before I knew God, He was with me. And He was, even though I didn't really know Him, I sang to Him in church as a child. One of my best memories is standing beside my father, hearing him sing, "Holy, holy, holy." They sang it every Sunday in our church. Just standing beside him, looking up at him, and him singing, "Holy, holy, holy."
Yes.
Those were the memories that I took away from church. So I always knew there was a God. I didn't know much else, but that's what I knew. But I look back now and I realize God saved me out of so many things. He protected me through so many things that could have gone so differently.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
His faithfulness. He was faithful to me when I made terrible choices, and he never wavered. When I wavered, He didn't waver. He remained with me. I know now, I understand now that I know His heart grieved. I know He cried at some of the situations that I was in, and the pain and the abuse and just the terrible, terrible things that happened. I know He was there crying over the choices, in the circumstances that they had led to. But He never left me. When it seemed like no one else loved me, He loved me. His love never diminished. It never changed. It was steadfast, and He loved me. And you see, now when I look back, and I see God now so differently. I've studied, I've meditated, I've learned who God is. I am just so incredibly, and will be forever, thankful that He never left me. He never forsook me. He stayed with me. He protected me. He gave me strength when I had no strength to do anything. I was just in the depths of despair. He gave me strength somehow. My phone rang that night. He provided the lifeline. And so I'm just so grateful for that. His goodness to me. He's been so incredibly good to me in spite of all my failures, all the things, my sin, my foolishness, all my just terrible, terrible things in my life. He remained good to me. I remember I was living on this incredibly beautiful property that had a view that you would just die for over our valley here. And it just was amazing. but it had a lot of acreage, and eventually I had to do the mowing myself. And so I had this big tractor, and I was out mowing this acreage and bumping up and down, and it was hot, and oh, I'm telling you, I mean, it was hard work to do on top of everything else.
Yes.
But you know, I heard God's voice say to me in the sweetest, kindest voice, Dianne, it is good for you to experience these consequences. Not with condemnation, not with judgment, not with anger. And I shook my head and I said, yes, Lord, I know. And the other thing that has really struck me recently is, I hope this will really encourage people in prayer. You know, God started, I began to understand that it was God who was creating prayers for me to pray, because I started to realize, wait a minute, where did that come from? That was not in my head, not in my mind, but I knew, I learned, these were prayers that God had given me to pray over my life. The first one was, and I started praying this 25 years ago, and I prayed it faithfully. And that prayer was, God, would you give me a hunger for you that can never be filled? And would you give me a thirst for you that can never be sated? 25 years ago, he gave me that prayer, and I prayed it faithfully. And if you look at my life today, you will know I have a hunger for God that can never be filled. I will always, always, always keep seeking him, and a thirst for him that will never be sated, that will continue to draw me to him. And that was my prayer for 25 years. And I knew he gave me that prayer. The second one was, and this happened probably 2 years before I received this big promotion, out of nowhere, not in my mind, not consciously, out of my spirit, the prayer, God, would you give me courage to do hard things? Because when I accepted this promotion, it was the hardest thing I had ever done. I was trying to fill the shoes of a man who was just an incredible entrepreneur. But 2 or 3 years before that, I had any inkling that could have, wasn't even a thought in my mind, a remote possibility. God had me praying, God, would you grant me courage to do hard things? About 2 or 3 years before I ran across Audrey and Heart Physics and Ultimate Impact Mentorship Group, I began to earnestly pray every day, every day, every day, every day. Father, would you grant me an open, hungry, tender, listening, hearing, obeying, vulnerable, teachable heart? And I prayed that day after day after day. And Lord, would you own, operate, and occupy my heart? Now, I've learned that I have a choice in that. I have to make that choice. But those are the prayers that God gave me over the years. And I just have, when I think about that, I think about his faithfulness to me. And I think about how he prepared the way. And he never wavered. Dr. Jim has taught us that Jehovah Rohi, our shepherd, is always, always 24/7 leading us, trying to lead us into God's best for us, into wholeness, into sozo, right? The word sozo.
Yes.
That's the Greek word for salvation, healed, prospered, set apart, delivered.
Yes.
And I just see the faithfulness of God, the goodness of God, his strength, his love, in spite of all the difficult years of my life. And so I truly give thanks to God. I give thanks to Dr. Jim and the ministry. And, Abby, I know you've noticed this. I don't know that Dr. Jim has taken one day off of his commitment to us in Ultimate Impact.
Mm-hmm.
He has been so committed, even over Christmas. He never took a day off.
Mm-hmm.
He is so committed to us.
I think he doesn't realize how many people are watching, yes, and appreciating him. How much?
Yes, and that it has, my life has done a complete turnaround because of his commitment to teach us the truth, to teach us the word, to encourage us and challenge us to apply it. And I just have to give credit to not in any way to flatter him, or I just cannot even describe my gratefulness to him for his heart to change the way people see God. That is his that's over the ministry. That's their mission statement, to change the way
the world sees
the world sees God. And he has changed the way I see God, and it has changed my life. I am so incredibly grateful and so thankful. And I'm so thankful to my beautiful friends that I've gained along the journey, who have believed in me, who have supported me, who have encouraged me, and become friends. And I'm just so thankful.
Can I add one thing? God sees the best in you. Remember, God believes in you. And it sounds weird, Dianne, would you like to say about this? God believes in me? What do you mean by that?
Yes.
Means
you see, thank you, Abby, for bringing that up. I just had this conversation with my daughter, actually. And I said to her, Anne Maria, I know over the years you've thought I have rose-colored glasses on, because I don't see all the things that, maybe aren't quite what they should be or whatever. And
that's good.
That's not what I see. I've never seen that. I'm not immune to it. I don't have my head stuck in the sand.
Right.
But that's not what I see when I see you, when I think of you. That's not what I see. I see you as my beautiful daughter. I see you for who I know God created you to be. I've always seen you that way. That's what I see. But it was such an eye-opener to me. You see, that's how I can know now that even through all my difficulties, that's how God saw me. He didn't see all my mistakes. He didn't see all my difficulties. That's not the lens he saw me through. He saw me through the beautiful daughter he created at conception.
Yes.
And his beautiful design, his beauty that he placed within me. And that's the lens he has always seen me through. He doesn't remember my past.
Yes.
He doesn't remember those things. He just sees me as, and has always seen me as the beautiful daughter that he created. And so, yes, God doesn't hold anything against you. God isn't angry with you. He's not the God you can never satisfy. He's the God who's just waiting for you to trust him. Trust who he says he is. Trust that you are who he says you are, and that you can do what he says you can do. And he has believed in you from day one. And so, yes, Abby, he sure does believe in us, and it never wavers, ever, not for a second.
Dianne, I'd like you to close with Psalm 40, and would you also, after that, lead people in prayer through those 4 types of prayers that you've been praying all of your life?
Yes.
Is that
yes,
okay?
Yes, that's great, Abby.
Okay.
So Psalm 40 in the Passion Translation, there's just a couple of verses that I'd like to read, verses 1 to 3. And it says, I waited and waited and waited some more, patiently, knowing God would come through for me. Then, at last, he bent down and listened to my cry. He stooped down to lift me out of danger, from the desolate pit I was in, out of the muddy mess I had fallen into. Now he's lifted me up into a firm, secure place and steadied me while I walk along his ascending path. A new song for a new day rises up in me. Every time I think about how he breaks through for me, ecstatic praise pours out of my mouth until everyone hears how God has set me free. Many will see his miracles. They'll stand in awe of God and fall in love with him. Just before I pray, Abby, there's one more thing I would like to share with people. Audrey Meisner, I don't know if you can see this in the glare of the light, gave me this.
Bring it closer to camera. Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's pretty worn, it's pretty tattered, and some of the words you can't even read.
That's good. It's alive.
Audrey gave me this book. It's called Inspired by the Psalms, and it's by Elizabeth Nixon. And they are decrees that renew your heart and your mind. And Audrey told me she memorized them. And I thought, well, if it worked for Audrey, it'll work for me. So I set out over the last 3 years, I have been memorizing these decrees. I use them a lot. They have been really integral to my journey. But the interesting thing is, there were decrees in here that I would read that would talk about, I am the medicine of laughter in your day. Speak that. I am to God, like the medicine of laughter to your day. There were sentences like that. I would say the words, but inside I would just say, I am not like the medicine of laughter in his day. There's no, that was just like, no, that I just could not comprehend that at all. When I do that decree now, it is completely different. My heart is alive with joy when I speak those words, because I know now I am like laughter, like the medicine of laughter in his day. I understand I am that to God now. It's just been such a transformation. I was actually speaking one day at a ladies' breakfast not too long ago, and I woke up and I was hearing the words from this decree. So I wasn't quite awake. So after I got aware, I realized, oh, I know what decree that is. So when I got up, I got it out, and the tears poured down my face as I realized, oh my word, this has manifest in my life.
Wow.
This is this is truth. This is my life now.
Yes.
It was, I just wept.
Mhm.
I just was so amazed of the transformation that God had done in my heart.
Because all life, when we go through troubles, we believe in God's promises. It's good. But when we
Yes.
see Him come to pass, we just, oh, we
It was just such a realization that, oh my goodness, every sentence of this decree
wow.
has come to pass in
Amen.
my life. This is my life now. And it was just such a remarkable moment for me. It was just like a light had come on. I actually saw that where I come from and the transformation that had happened in my heart.
Amazing.
It was just an amazing moment. So I just really, if anyone wants to know more about that, I can certainly uh, give them the information of how to get it. But it's just, it so aligns with the truth that we are learning. These decrees are based on heart truth, and they're extremely helpful. So I wanted to just share that, hopeful that it would help others as much as it has helped me.
I'd like to add one thing. As Diane was reading Psalm 40, I immediately went back. My mind went back to meditations, Bible, 5 or 6 hours, whatever we do. She is reading, and if you haven't seen this, please check on this YouTube link. She is reading meditation with beautiful music backgrounds, nature sounds, entire sometimes chapters we have delegated. Would you like to say a little bit about that? It's
Yeah, well, what I would like to say is, again, Abby, thank you. I don't know even how that happened, but um, I have been kind of feeling just and trusting, waiting on God. I live in a bit of an isolated area, so it's just been, okay, God, I'm going to just wait and trust and see what happens of where I can now minister. I want to serve. I want to be a servant. I want to love other people the way, God, you have so loved me. And so, um, Abby, I just am amazed that you, uh, I don't know, got the inspiration, I guess, that for us, me and a few others, to read scripture. And I'm telling you, it was such a blessing to me to do that.
Mhm.
Um, I was so blessed. Often I'd have to redo them several times. Something would happen, a noise would be in the background or something, and as I did them, they were getting embedded in my heart. And I mean, I was just so blessed even in just doing that. And so, you know, I want to give, and I know Abby's not looking for this, and she probably maybe won't even like this, but we owe a debt of gratitude to Abby for her inspirations, for her hard work, her time that she spends creating these opportunities for us to bless other people and to minister to other people. And none of it would be happening without Abby's inspiration, without her drive and her passion. And I am one. It was like the lifeline from Audrey. It has been a lifeline to me. And I just want to say thank you.
And
That doesn't even
thanks
seem
back to you.
adequate.
Thanks
Pardon
back
me?
to you, because the teamwork makes this happen. I would never be able to read. So I don't know if I explained, this is video where Diane and a couple of other people are reading, literally reading Bible to you with beautiful
Yes.
sounds of music where you can just put it on wherever you are. Either you go to sleep. It's amazing too. As she said, it just gets deep in your heart.
It
Diane,
does.
when I listen to you, even though I may know this chapter really well or that particular psalm, but as I'm listening, it just does stir something in my heart, refreshes something that I know, but I'm finding out new stuff. It's amazing.
Yes. It is. It's a very powerful thing when we audibly speak the word and listen. It is very, very powerful. And because the music that it's set to is so peaceful, it puts your heart in a place of peace so you can receive it. And I think that's a huge key to it. So again, yeah, we hope you will let it minister to you. And again, I just thank you so much, Abby, for the opportunities you've given to me.
Thank you, honey. Would you like to lead people in prayer?
Sure, I would love to.
Amen.
Jesus, I just thank you that you are all things life, that your goodness is beyond our ability to even comprehend. I am a life transformed because you became the propitiation for me, because of your death, your burial, and your resurrection, because of your resurrection life, because of your faithfulness, Father, because of your mercy and your love. I just have no words to thank you. And so, Father, I pray for every person who may hear this. I pray for their heart. I pray for a heart connection with you. I pray, Father, that anything that has impacted them from listening to us today, that they will act upon it. If they felt inspiration, that they will write it down and act upon it quickly, that they'll reach out and learn more of how, Father, you desire to meet with them one-on-one in the canvas of their heart, to heal, to restore, to make whole, to bring forth life, your goodness, your promises, every good thing. And I just thank you, Father, again for this opportunity to minister from the place that you have ministered to me and to pour it out into the hearts and lives of others. I pray, Father, that you will grant a hunger for you that can never be filled, and thus will keep bringing people to you moment by moment, day by day, a thirst for you that can never be sated, that will keep us at your feet, keep us connected to you in our hearts, Father. I pray for those, Lord, who are broken, who are discouraged, who are in despair, who think they've crossed the line where God, you could never forgive them. They've just done too much or gone too far. I pray for those, Lord, who feel stuck and frustrated. And Father, I pray that you will give them courage, Lord, to do hard things, to reach out, to keep seeking. I pray, Father, for open, tender, listening, hearing, obeying, teachable hearts, Father, hearts where we are willing to lay down all of our strongly held opinions, that we would just cast them at your feet and be willing to write truth, your truth, pure truth, into the very fabric of our heart beliefs and experience life, Zoe life, the life of God that you designed and created for us back in the garden, Lord. That we would live from that garden in our hearts, that kingdom of heaven on earth that is within us. I thank you, Father, for every life. I thank you, Father, for your love for them, which is unwavering. And I thank you for new beginnings, Lord Jesus. I thank you for Abby. I pray you will bless her work, bless her family, her heart, her worship, her violin music. I pray, Father, that it will bless your ears and bless the hearers and draw them into that place that cannot be described of intimacy with you in our hearts. I thank you, Father. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Father.
Dianne, you're such a heaven opener, if I may say it. You open up heavens for those that want to engage.
Yes.
It's just amazing. I see heaven open. Seriously, I see Jesus so close. Yes, he is always with me, but I know that those that did listen and engage, they feel the same right now.
Yes.
Thank you for being this catalyst. Thank you for being such a helper. And I can't wait till you're gonna become a heart coach physics.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to
Physics
that.
coach. I always mix it up. And if you would like to, may I say, if you would like to contact Dianne directly, email
Yes, please do. Yes.
her email address will be underneath this video. Go to description, you will easily find it.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you so much.
Yeah,
Dianne.
thank you, Abby. God bless you.
You know I love you.
I love you too.
And now more people too. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.